The problem isn't trying to convince people that the environment is important. That's understood. The problem is that there is no time left, and the amount of effort required to change is Mount Everest. Halting the rise in temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade is seen as a last hope to avoiding catastrophic climate change, though even a 1.5 C change is considered extremely damaging. We set the target to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Okay, then that doesn't sound too bad. I'm sure we can do something by 2050. Except to reach that, we needed to have realistically started about 20 years ago, as indicated by this graph from Carbon Brief and the environmental writer David Roberts. In 2000, a 3% annual fall would have seen enough to stay below 1.5. Instead, emissions have continued to rise almost every year. By 2019, emissions would have to fall 15% a year to stay below 1.5 C. David Roberts says that is unrealistic and it's not going to happen. Every year that goes by makes the dramatic cut in carbon emissions more and more unfeasible. So what are the timescales we need to work within? It's shockingly small. The information I'm going to present comes from the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, which feeds into the British government's CCC, the Climate Change Committee. My numbers can be checked easily with a Google search. This is a timeline between 2021 and 2080. We are about here at 1.2 C, above pre-industrial times. A rise of 1.2 centigrade is already a disaster. Katharine Hayhoe, a climate scientist at Texas Tech University and chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy, points out that we have already pushed humanity beyond all historical boundaries. The oceans alone are absorbing heat equivalent to 5 Hiroshima atomic bombs every second. The last time it was hotter was at least 125,000 years ago. We have more heat-trapping carbon dioxide than any time in the past 2 million years, perhaps more. The heat dome in June 2021 pulverized previous temperature records in the US's Pacific Northwest and Canada's West Coast, killing hundreds of people and billions of sea creatures. The sea creatures were roasted alive in their own shells. This would have been virtually impossible if human activity hadn't heated the planet. The Earth's temperature has raced upwards faster than any comparable period. What I want to show you is when temperatures are projected to increase to 1.5 centigrade. The IPCC uses 3 scenarios. The best is shown in blue, the intermediate is shown in orange, and the worst scenario is shown in red. The best scenario gives only a 50-50 chance of avoiding the worst and most frightening impacts of climate change. But the other scenarios are considerably worse. However, by the end of 2021, we had already used 86% of the budget that will keep us to our 1.5 C limit. Most likely now, we will hit the 1.5 C somewhere between 6 to 9 years. And after that, temperatures will continue to rise. Rises in temperature over 1.5 C will see significant difficulties. At 1.5 C, about 14% of the world's population will be hit by severe heat waves about once every 5 years. It is likely that what we have seen in 2021 will happen again with the hellish fires of Australia, Canada, California, and Greece. The increase of wildfires will add to climate change, destroying carbon dioxide absorbing forests, and instead of absorbing, will release more carbon dioxide. This is called a tipping point. There will be many more tipping points where the natural world will release more significant amounts of greenhouse gases, possibly pushing our world further into a heatwave hell. Only 6 to 9 years. It's alarmingly close. The temperature will ramp up to 2 degrees centigrade between 20 and 31 years. Severe heat waves that occurred once a decade now happen every other year. Joe Regi-Gelge, a climate scientist at Imperial College London, points out that globally an extra 4.9 million people will die each year from extreme heat. Extreme crop drought, which had once occurred once a decade, now doubles in frequency. A bit more than 2 degrees centigrade, a third of all the world's food production will be at risk. We are risking starvation. 99% of coral reefs will dissolve away. Nearly 1 in 10 vertebrates will lose half their habitat, and almost 1 in 5 plants will lose half of theirs. Ecosystems are set to die off, spanning corals, wetlands, alpine areas, and Arctica, according to Regi-Gelge. Wildfires become 4 times more likely. Water availability to humanity drops at a rate of 1 centimetre per year in the past 20 years, and more than 5 billion people are expected to have inadequate water supplies in the next 3 decades. There will certainly be dramatic knock-on effects, but what they are will be hard to predict. What if permafrost melting and flooding cuts off critical roads used by supply chains? What if storms knock out the world's leading computer chip factories? What if half of the world's population are exposed to disease-carrying mosquitoes? Extreme hardship could lead to war and societal collapse. MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has projected that we will see societal collapse by 2040. It makes me wonder why I'm bothering to pay into my retirement fund. If society manages to hold on, then that's great, but that things will only get harder from there. A 2.5 degrees centigrade increase could happen within 32 years and up to 58 years. It makes everything that has come before worse in terms of crop failure, heat waves, wildfires, floods, and droughts. The World Bank has estimated that 216 million people would be forced to flee, mostly from developing countries by 2050. $23 trillion is on track to be wiped from the global economy, upending more people. In 43 years, the world might reach 3 degrees centigrade. We could live to see the worst destruction to our planet and the suffering of our children. Wildfires become common. A sea level rise of 3 degrees centigrade will send a torrent of unwelcome water to coastal cities, which will be in danger of becoming a largely marine environment. This will happen to places such as Miami, Shanghai, and Bangladesh. There is so much more that has been written about. Please check my sources. Your opinion matters, not only to encourage politicians to take action, but for you to accept actions required to prevent climate change without complaint, as you understand why these actions are so vitally important. Thank you for your time.